The living room buzzed with forced laughter and clinking glasses. I sat on the edge of the sofa, watching relatives I barely knew celebrate my father's latest business success. Samuel Okoro stood at the center, soaking in praise like sunlight. I waited for the right moment, then spoke clearly across the room. "Dad, I wanted to ask about Mum's properties. The ones on Maple Street and the lakefront cottage. Why were they transferred without any family discussion?" The room went silent. My father's smile vanished. His eyes turned cold, sharp as broken glass. "Ungrateful," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "This is what I raised. A daughter who counts inheritance while I'm still breathing." Laughter rippled through the room. My uncle slapped his knee. My stepmother Claudia smirked behind her wine glass. My siblings Victor and Lena looked away, embarrassed for me or of me, I couldn't tell which. I felt my face burn, but I didn't respond. I'd asked a simple question. Somehow, that made me the villain. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs for water and heard Claudia's voice from the study. "She's asking the wrong questions too early." The next morning, I tried again. I found my father in his office, surrounded by documents and morning coffee. I knocked softly and entered when he grunted permission. "Dad, I wasn't trying to be disrespectful yesterday. I just want to understand what happened to Mom's things." He didn't look up from his papers. "You want to understand? Fine. Understand this. Everything you have, I gave you. Your education, your clothes, this roof. You owe me everything, Nadia. Everything." His words hit like fists. I felt my throat tighten. "I'm not ungrateful. I'm just confused." "Then stay confused," he interrupted. "Or find somewhere else to ask questions." Within a week, my bank card stopped working. My father claimed it was time I learned independence. My siblings said nothing. Victor muttered something about keeping peace. Lena suggested I apologize. That evening, while cleaning out old storage boxes, I found a locked folder buried under tax returns. The label read, "Estate Drafts minus 2016. I forced the folder open with a letter opener. Inside were printouts of email exchanges, legal consultations, and notes written in my mother's handwriting. The dates ranged from early 2016 to just before she passed in late 2017. One email jumped out. It was addressed to a lawyer named Harrison Teal. "I need to ensure my daughter is protected, regardless of what happens to me. Samuel means well, but control frightens him. I want a separate will." My hands trembled. A separate will. My mother had planned something my father never mentioned. I searched for replies, follow-ups, anything. Most emails were vague, discussing timing and discretion. One mentioned a meeting scheduled for March 2016. I checked the calendar. That was 2 months before her diagnosis. She knew something. Or feared something. The law firm's name was printed at the bottom. Teal and Associates, Downtown Riverview. I grabbed my coat. The firm still existed, I checked online. And if Harrison Teal remembered my mother, maybe he'd remember what she wanted to protect me from. The office was modest, tucked between a bookstore and a dry cleaner. Harrison Teal was older now, grey-haired and cautious. He studied me carefully when I introduced myself. "Amara's daughter," he said softly. "You look like her." I sat across from him and explained why I'd come. He listened without interrupting, then sighed heavily. "Your mother did draft a will. A protective one. She was worried about asset commingling, about losing control. She wanted certain properties held in trust for you." "So where is it?" I asked. "Never executed," he said. "She scheduled a signing appointment but cancelled last minute. She said she'd reschedule. She never did." I felt a sinking weight in my chest. Did someone stop her? He hesitated. "I don't deal in speculation, Miss Okoro. But I will say this. Interference is common in families where money and control overlap." He leaned forward. "Your father updated his own will shortly after your mother passed. Did you know that?" I didn't. I left the office with more questions than answers. My mother had tried to protect me, but something or someone had stopped her. And my father had moved quickly to secure his own plans. The will wasn't just about assets. It was about control. About who gets to speak, who gets to ask, and who gets silenced. I decided to stop asking, at least out loud. For weeks, I played the role of the quiet daughter. I attended dinners, smiled politely, and avoided any mention of my mother's name. My father relaxed. Claudia stopped watching me so closely. Then my phone buzzed late one night. Unknown number. If you want answers, stop asking your father. I stared at the screen. My heartbeat quickened. I typed back, "Who is this?" No response, but the message was clear. Someone else knew the truth. And they were willing to help if I was smart enough to stay quiet and wait. 2 weeks later, I received a call from Auntie Grace, my mother's older sister. She lived 3 hours away and rarely visited. Her voice was careful, measured. "Nadia, I heard what happened at the gathering. I think it's time we talked." We met at a small cafe near the highway. Grace ordered tea and spoke in low tones, glancing around as if the walls had ears. "Your mother funded most of your father's early ventures. The startup capital, the business connections, even the down payment on the first office. Samuel was ambitious, but Amara was the foundation." I felt a jolt of shock. My father always spoke of his sacrifices, his risks, his hard-earned success. The family myth was built on his sole effort. "Why didn't anyone ever say this?" I asked. "Because your father controls the story. And stories become truth when no one challenges them." I cross-referenced dates, traced ownership changes, and mapped every transfer back to its origin. The pattern was clear. After my mother's death, properties she'd owned individually were gradually merged into joint accounts, then shifted into corporate holdings. On paper, it looked like efficient estate management, but the timing told a different story. Every major transfer happened within months of my mother's passing. While the family was still grieving, still distracted, I found one document that made my breath catch. A deed transfer dated 3 weeks after her funeral. Signed by my father. Witnessed by Claudia. My mother's signature was notarized, but the notary's license had been suspended 2 years prior. I sat back, staring at the screen. This wasn't just about money. It was about erasing her. And if my father's will contained the same level of control, the same careful architecture, then maybe, just maybe, my mother had built something into it. A failsafe. A reckoning. I replayed that night at the gathering over and over. My father's fury. The laughter. The word ungrateful thrown at me like a weapon. But my question hadn't been about greed. It had been about disappearance. Where did my mother's things go? Why was her name erased from titles, accounts, and records? Why did the family act like she'd never owned anything at all? I wasn't counting inheritance. I was counting losses. Through a legal contact, I requested a copy of my father's current will. It took weeks, but eventually, a sealed envelope arrived. I opened it alone in my apartment, hands shaking. The language was dense, formal, and cold. But the structure was clear. Victor would inherit the company. Lena would receive the properties. Claudia would control the financial accounts. My name appeared once. Previously estranged daughter, Nadia Okoro, is excluded from primary distribution due to demonstrated ingratitude and lack of familial loyalty. I read it twice. Then I saw the footnote. See Addendum B. Conditional provisions. I called my lawyer immediately. He reviewed the document and let out a low whistle. "You're not named in the primary will, but you're central to the addendum." What does that mean? It means there's a secondary set of instructions that only activate under certain conditions, usually incapacitation or death. But this one's unusual. He read aloud. "In the event that Samuel Okoro publicly accuses Nadia Okoro of greed, disloyalty, or ingratitude without documented evidence, and said accusation occurs in the presence of 3 or more witnesses, a mandatory forensic audit of all estate assets shall be triggered." Upon his incapacitation or passing, I felt my pulse quicken. He accused me in front of the entire family. Then the addendum activates, my lawyer said. And he can't stop it. I hung up and sat in stunned silence. My mother hadn't just planned protection. She'd planned accountability. The call came early on a Tuesday morning. My father had suffered a massive stroke. He was stable but unconscious. The family was gathering at the hospital. I was notified last. When I arrived, Victor and Lena were already in the waiting room. Claudia sat pale and rigid, clutching her phone. No one greeted me. A hospital administrator approached with a clipboard. We need the next of kin to present estate documents for medical decision-making authority. Victor stepped forward smugly. I'm the primary heir. I'll handle it. The administrator glanced at me. And you are? His daughter, I said quietly. She made a note and walked away. Victor glared at me. Don't start, Nadia. I didn't respond. I just waited, because I knew what was coming. 3 days later, Victor sent me a text. Will reading scheduled. Friday, 2 p.m. Lawyer's office. You're invited. Barely. I showed up early. The conference room was cold and formal. Victor sat at the head of the table, Lena beside him. Claudia occupied the far end, stiff-backed and silent. The lawyer, a man named Foster, entered with a leather folder. Victor leaned back, arms crossed. Let's get this over with. Foster opened the file and began reading. The primary distributions were exactly as I'd seen. Company to Victor, properties to Lena, accounts to Claudia. Victor smirked. Lena exhaled in relief. Claudia's shoulders relaxed. Foster kept reading. Nadia Okoro is excluded from primary distribution due to work. We know, Victor interrupted. She was ungrateful. Dad made that clear. But I noticed something. Victor's hands were clenched. His jaw tight. He wasn't confident. He was nervous. Foster cleared his throat. Now, the conditional addendum. The room went still. Foster read slowly, deliberately. This addendum was drafted and executed by Samuel Okoro in 2018, with legal consultation from Harrison Teal. Claudia's face went pale. Victor sat up straight. Foster continued. The addendum states that if Samuel Okoro ever publicly accused his daughter, Nadia, of greed, disloyalty, or ingratitude without proof, in the presence of 3 or more witnesses, a forensic audit must be triggered upon incapacitation. Lena frowned. What does that mean? It means, Foster said, that because Mr. Okoro publicly accused Nadia at a family gathering in 2022, witnessed by multiple relatives, this audit is now mandatory. Victor slammed his hand on the table. That's ridiculous. He was emotional. People say things. The clause is legally binding, Foster interrupted. And it cannot be delayed or dismissed. Claudia stood abruptly. This is insane. Who put this in? Foster met her gaze evenly. Samuel Okoro did. Voluntarily. I said nothing. I just watched the smiles collapse, one by one. Foster pulled out a second document. The audit was prearranged with an independent firm. It will examine all asset transfers, property deeds, and financial movements from 2017 onward. Victor's face turned red. You can't do this. It's already done, Foster said. The clause activated the moment Mr. Okoro was incapacitated. Lena looked at me, confused and frightened. Did you know about this? I met her eyes. Not until recently. Claudia's voice was ice. This is your doing. No, I said quietly. This is Dad's doing. He wrote it. Foster continued. The addendum lists multiple witnesses to the public accusation. Their statements have been recorded and notarized. He read the names aloud. My uncle, 2 cousins, a family friend, all people who had laughed that night. Victor stood, shaking. We'll challenge this. You can try, Foster said. But the language is airtight. And the audit begins Monday. The room fell silent. I stood and walked out. Behind me, I heard Claudia whisper, What have you done, Samuel? The audit took 6 weeks. I wasn't involved directly, but I received updates. The firm was thorough, professional, and relentless. They traced every property transfer, every account merger, every notarized signature, and they found exactly what I expected. My mother's assets hadn't been stolen, but they'd been quietly absorbed, diluted, and redirected. Her name erased, her contributions rewritten as my father's sacrifices. The audit report was delivered to Foster's office on a cold October morning. I sat across from him as he summarized the findings. Your mother's properties were transferred using questionable documentation. Some signatures appear irregular. Several transfers occurred without proper legal oversight. What does that mean? It means the estate can be restructured. Not reversed, but corrected. He slid a document across the desk. The final recommendation is reassignment of controlling interest in key properties. Not to you directly, but to a trust established in your mother's name. You would serve as trustee. I stared at the paper. I'd control access. Yes. And the family would need to justify every claim moving forward. I signed. The will didn't punish anyone. It didn't strip Victor of the company or Lena of her inheritance. It didn't leave Claudia destitute, but it forced transparency. Every property tied to my mother's original assets now required trustee approval for sale, transfer, or use. That trustee was me. Victor couldn't liquidate without my consent. Lena couldn't leverage properties without documentation. Claudia couldn't redirect funds without oversight. They weren't cut off. They were accountable. 2 weeks after the restructuring, Victor called me. His voice was tight, formal. I need access to the Maple Street property for a business deal. Send me the proposal, I said calmly. Nadia, come on. Don't make this difficult. I'm not. I'm making it transparent. He hung up. 3 days later, the proposal arrived. It was legitimate. I approved it. Victor didn't say thank you, but he didn't argue either. My father regained consciousness in early November. He was weak, his speech slurred, but his mind was sharp. He asked to see me privately. I sat beside his hospital bed, hands folded in my lap. You did this, he said quietly. No, Dad, you did. He closed his eyes. I wanted to protect the family. Keep things simple. By erasing Mom? He flinched. I didn't erase her. I managed her assets. I kept the business strong. You controlled the story, I said. And when I asked questions, you called me ungrateful. He was silent for a long time. I thought you'd understand one day. I do understand, I said. I understand that you are afraid of losing control. But control isn't the same as truth. He looked at me, something broken in his eyes. What happens now? Nothing changes for you, I said. But nothing gets hidden either. I stood. Explanations aren't accountability, Dad. I left before he could respond. Weeks passed. The family adjusted. Slowly, reluctantly, they learned to work within the new structure. Lena asked for help understanding the trust terms. I explained them patiently. Victor requested a meeting to discuss future planning. I agreed. Claudia said nothing, but she stopped glaring. At a holiday gathering smaller, quieter than before, my uncle approached me. You were always smart, Nadia. We should have seen it. I smiled politely. You saw what you wanted to see. Auntie Grace caught my eye across the room and nodded. Later, Lena asked if I'd join them for dinner the following week. I'll think about it, I said. She looked hurt. We're still family. I know, I said. But family isn't just showing up. It's showing up honestly. I left early. Kept only one property for myself, the small house on Riverside Drive. My mother had loved it. She'd planted roses in the garden and spent Sunday mornings reading on the porch. I restored it carefully, kept her books on the shelves, her paintings on the walls. Everything else stayed in the trust. One afternoon, while sorting through old mail, I found a letter addressed to me. The envelope was yellowed, the handwriting unmistakable. My mother's. It had been tucked inside a book of poetry she'd given me years ago. I opened it with trembling hands. The letter was dated 2 weeks before she passed. My dearest Nadia, If you're reading this, it means you asked the questions I hoped you would. It means you didn't stay silent. I'm writing this because I know your father. I love him, but I know him. He fears losing control more than anything. And fear makes people bury the truth. I've tried to protect you. Not with money, money is just paper. But with structure. With conditions. With a will that refuses to let the truth disappear. If he ever calls you ungrateful, know this. Asking questions is the most grateful thing you can do. It means you care enough to understand, not just accept. I built this for you. Not as punishment, but as protection. Be strong, my love. Be honest. And never let anyone shame you for seeking the truth. All my love, Mom. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face. She'd known. She'd planned for this exact moment. The addendum wasn't revenge. It was a final act of love. I returned to the hospital one last time before my father was discharged. He looked older, frailer, but his eyes were clear. I read the letter, I said quietly. He didn't ask which one. He already knew. She was always 3 steps ahead of me, he said. A faint smile crossing his lips. She loved you, Dad. But she loved the truth more. He nodded slowly. I'm sorry, Nadia, for calling you ungrateful. For making you the villain when you were just asking to understand. I sat beside him. Gratitude doesn't mean silence. It means honesty. He reached for my hand. His grip weak but warm. I know that now. We sat together in silence. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet, but it was a beginning. Life moved forward. I continued working, managing the trust, and rebuilding relationships on my own terms. Victor and I maintained professional respect. Lena and I spoke more often. Claudia and I remained distant, but civil. The family narrative changed. Slowly, carefully. Relatives who once mocked me now spoke of resilience. The same voices that laughed now praised patience. I didn't celebrate their changed tune. I just kept moving. One evening, Auntie Grace called. You did it, Nadia. You honored her. I just asked questions, I said. Exactly, Grace replied. And that's what she wanted. I framed my mother's letter and hung it in the riverside house, beside her favorite painting. Some days, I sat on the porch and read her books. Other days, I worked in the garden, tending the roses she'd planted. I didn't erase my father's story. But I refused to let my mother's be forgotten. The will had forced the answer. But the question was the inheritance. I learned something important through all of this. Asking questions didn't make me ungrateful. It made me prepared. The will didn't punish my father or my siblings. It simply refused to lie. Some people called it revenge. Others called it justice. I called it correction, because the truth doesn't need drama. It just needs daylight. My mother knew that. She built a will that waited patiently, quietly, until the right moment. And when that moment came, it didn't shout. It just spoke. Some answers wait in vaults and legal folders. Others are written to outlive the people who tried to bury them. I didn't inherit money. I inherited the right to ask why. And that, I realized,